time. Welcome back, everybody. It's time now for the third keynote of the second day. Before the keynote, I would like to talk about this afternoon. In the program, it says 4 o'clock, conclusion, feedback, and closing ceremony. We are doing that. Before I said we take it away, we're not taking it away. There have been more questions from the audience that we did not have time to answer this morning. So we will have the conclusion, feedback, this afternoon at 4 o'clock with the same settings on stage, and you can raise your hand and ask questions and feedback. 4 o'clock. And now I would also like to talk about the Facebook group we have, ACE 2018, participants, evaluation, reflections, and documentation. Please go online and join the group, and you can put feedback and give us some kind of information. On the webpage, the ACE 2018 webpage, under the program, you will find the PowerPoints or the PDFs of the different lectures. Now I will leave the word to Susanne and Ulrik. Welcome up.
Okay. Ingen problem. Jeg fikser det. Lydet er på plads. Thank you, Christian. Wow, what a great conference. I feel a little bit humble standing here, having to follow such masters. I'm Susanne, and I'm so excited to be here to talk to all of you about getting better with deliberate practice. This is by far the most exciting thing I've worked with in my career in a lot of years. The first time I heard about deliberate practice is 11 years ago, when I first started working with Scott. And Scott had written an article on super shrinks that many of you may have read. And I got interested in the topic, so I started plowing through all the articles. I started reading books. And in 2010, we had the first ACE conference. And K. Anders Ericsson had been invited to come speak. And I was blown away by his presentation. I was really blown away. And I was also really provoked because I come from the country that invented the Jantelog. Do you know the Jantelog? Don't think that you're better than us, says the Jantelog. And it was challenging something really core in my understanding of the world. So after struggling with this for a while and puzzling over the ideas, I realized I couldn't read more about it to understand it. The only way to really understand what deliberate practice means would be to try it out on myself. So I was thinking for a while about what I should try it out on. And I decided I would try it out on something far away from my real work, from my everyday life. I would try it out on my singing voice. And my question was, how much would deliberate practice even be able to change the way your voice sounds? I mean, that seems pretty set. But I followed the suggestions of Dr. Ericsson. I knew I had to get a good coach. So I went online and I Googled. And I Googled who I believe to be the best vocal coach in Denmark. And I'm so lucky to have him with me here on stage today. This is Ulrik Elholm. And Ulrik is well known, at least in Denmark, as a top vocal coach. He works on TV shows like The X Factor, Voice of Denmark. He also works for the professional record labels. So he works with all the artists that you hear on the radio. He works with actors. He works with musical stars. Welcome, Ulrik Elholm.
Thank you very much. Not all the stars, Susanne, but
Yeah, all
some
the
of them.
stars.
But thank you very much, and thank you for inviting me here. I still remember when Susanne called me, and she told me she was on this mission involving something called deliberate practice. And she had a dream about singing, and she defined herself as a beginner. Have I heard it a couple of times before? Yes, I have. And it means a lot of work and a lot of discipline, so I guess maybe I was not that open at first. But there was something in Susanne's approach that made me curious. And today I am so happy that I was curious back then. Yes.
Me too.
So in my work, I quite often come upon a word like talent. Talented singer. We have words like pop star, rock star, and I guess this star label even points in the direction of something heavenly, something from above, divine, with special gifts. And as Susanne said, I work with quite many of these artists, and they need just as much help as anybody else. Coaching, feedback, guidance, and help. Of course they do. And many of them, most of them, also work really hard to get where they are. Still, it's like the record labels would like to keep this a secret. And maybe it fits better for the business to keep these artists up there on the sky, more like natural born talents. It makes my work a little bit more difficult, and I also feel like it could be nice to send another message to the young people trying out this business. But and in a way, how many of us, if we think about it, actually believe that these singers came out of their mother with a beautiful la of some kind? Not really, right?
So when we started working, one of the things I admired a whole lot, I've brought her along actually, it's this person. You may know her.
If only I knew what I know today. Ooh, ooh. I would hold you in my arms.
Listen to her, but I get chills all over my body. Christina Aguilera. She has this powerful, big, loud, beautiful, warm sound to her voice. And that's how I wanted to sing. So when Ulrik and I first met, the first thing he wanted me to do was to record myself, to figure out what my baseline was. What is it you're able to do right now, Susanne, was his question. And so I did. I recorded my baseline, and I recorded my baseline singing Hurt by Christina Aguilera. And I thought to get us started, I would play you my baseline, just so you know where we're at. I apologize in advance for what you're about to hear, but I promise you it serves a higher purpose. Here we are. Oh, other way. There's nothing I wouldn't do to hear your voice again. Sometimes I wanna call you, but I know you won't be there. I don't.
Yes.
I don't know how many of you have tried singing along with the divas, but at certain points when you try to hit those high notes, your voice just does something like, and then you just can't continue. So that's what happened.
Yes. So the sound Susanne has on this recording could be characterized as a little bit thin, piercing, like a classically trained singer trying to adapt to another style. And there was a lot of work in front of Susanne, yes. But on the other side, it's always been my belief that if we work hard enough, we can achieve most things. So we started working. And we decided quickly to document the process and our work. And now we have worked together for 7 years.
Crazy.
And part of the result is this book that we wrote together, Getting Better with Deliberate Practice, where we would like to share some of the nuts and bolts of deliberate practice that we discovered in our work.
Oh, other way again. Here we go.
One of the key elements in the book is this model here, and it's probably you know the corner there, baseline. You heard baseline before, right? A couple of times, yes. And set a goal, and I guess it could also be the result, as Birgit Waller talked about the first day, knowing the result you would like to achieve, and the focused practice in the corner there. So you've probably heard about this a couple of times, and we would like to focus a little bit on some processes in between that we discovered in our work. So here we have uncover patterns, we call it, and planning and feedback. So the first step to become better, of course, is to measure where am I now, the baseline. And it could be how good a singer am I, or what's my effect size as a therapist, maybe. But we feel like we need to get a little bit deeper into that, to dig a little bit deeper. How did I become this singer? How did I become this therapist? And we could ask questions like, how did I get to this baseline? What did I practice? And how did I practice? Is there a reason why I'm good at some things and maybe not so good on other things? Have I built in habits, good and bad habits? And have I maybe even trained something wrong now and then? I see, for example, myself as an excellent driver. Ericsson's example of the 94%, I think I'm among those. I train every day. And some years ago, I was in Italy. Have any of you tried to drive in the mountains in Italy? It's a whole nother setting. And suddenly you realize that all those hours training on flat roads in Denmark doesn't help you much in the mountains in Italy.
No.
So maybe we could be more specific about what are we good at and what are we not so good at. And if we want to become better, we would have to look into how we train every day and what we train.
So sometimes it can be pretty hard at first glance to see where are the weak spots in our performance. To see it may require a deeper analysis, and you may even need help from somebody to look with you on your performance. Either a coach, for example, or your colleague. And one of the things that might show up is that we can have ways of thinking about our abilities that can hinder our ability to develop. For example, we can have a strong belief that something in our genes or something in what we were born with limits how much we're able to develop. We can believe that we were born to do certain things well, sing like Christina Aguilera, for example, and not do other things. In our field, and we've talked about this a bit throughout this conference, we may have a conviction that we were born with more or less empathy or intuition, and that impacts our ability to develop as a therapist. Stanford professor Carol Dweck talks about this as a fixed mindset. The mindset where you think there's a limit to how much you can train, so maybe practice doesn't make much sense. And her research shows that this mindset impacts our ability to learn and develop negatively. For me, when I met Ulrik, I was, for example, convinced that I was born with this soft, classical voice. And I didn't think I had a loud voice. And I would experience this when I was teaching with Scott, and Scott would say, "Speak up," because people couldn't hear me. And to myself privately, I would think, what are you talking about? I can't speak any different than this.
Yes. So, as I see it, this starts when we are born. These thoughts, these ideas about what we are born with and not born with. And as we grow up, it's built into our muscular memory, and we become parents one day. And I remember, for example, as a parent, my oldest son had to learn to bike. And in Denmark, it's nearly like some people say that kids are born on bikes in Denmark because we all bike. So that crucial moment where the dad needs to learn his son how to ride a bike. And we go to a safe place in the cottage on a safe road, and he gets on the bike and he drives 10 meters and then he falls and complains. And my role as a dad is to stay cool and say, yeah, just get up again, no problem. And he goes another 10 meters and he falls again, and it's like, oh, it hurts inside, but get up again, try one more time. And I don't know how many times he did it, and he got bruises, and he cried, and it was a mess, honestly speaking. So, and at some point, a thought came to my mind, very strong and terrible. I'm very ashamed today, actually. Maybe he was not born physically to ride a bike. And 2 weeks later, he biked just like any other kid. Yeah. So it can be very strong. Another thought could be, and I hear that in my field, for example, difference between the voices we are born with. Let's say Afro-Americans have bigger voices than Scandinavians. Yes? Of course there are differences, but in my experience it's mostly about technique and a certain setting we do in the throat, not to be too detailed. So if we look at, for example, the church, how we grew up, the culture, how it affects us, and if we go to church in Scandinavia, some of you still go to church now and then in Scandinavia? Yeah, not so often maybe. And if you do, you sing something like altid frejdig når du går. Or kind of, right? And if you are in the US, in Harlem, for example, you probably go more often to church, maybe even every Sunday. And what do you sing there? Something like, Amen! Amen! A lot of power. So you train that power setting every Sunday. Even if we look at the language, if you have experienced a group of Americans coming into a restaurant in Scandinavia. Yes? Sorry. They're a little bit loud now and then. And they have built into the language something we call twang. Some more, some less. But if I overdo my accent a little bit like this, like I'm coming from Texas, for example, it sounds, in a way you recognize this sound, right? If and sorry again for those who don't understand Swedish, Danish and Norwegian, but if I switch into Danish now with the same setting in my throat, og fortsætter med at tale på den her måde. Yes. So in my world, it's just a matter of a specific setting. And I would like to show you a slide from my everyday work. This slide here is a simple version, a simple way to try to categorize the voice, to make a map over the voice. And we created this for several reasons. For example, to be able to communicate better among colleagues, thereby also easier to make research. And of course also to have better communication, to be more specific with the singers. I myself have experience, and I have colleagues that experience that too, singing lessons as being a little bit fluffy, not so clear, sometimes even a bit more like wellness or religion. Just believe in it and then it works. Well, maybe not so specific. And the problem is when you get home, how will you train that? So we created this, and what you see here is 4 different gears, 4 ways of using the voice. Again, it's a simple version and it's a square. So real life always have exceptions and stuff. But the first one, called neutral, is the one I gave you an example of in the Scandinavian church. And if I speak like this, I'm speaking in neutral. And it works well sometimes when you call home and you have to say a little bit delayed. You could sing also like Marilyn Monroe, happy birthday to you. And I could also speak like this, and it would still be the neutral quality of the voice. The next one is called curbing. It has a held-back feeling to it, so if I overdo it and speak in curbing, it could be a little bit like this. And it's a bit louder, but still not that loud. So if I'm in a bar and I'm trying to get a couple of beers, and there's a lot of noise around me, it's difficult. Can I have 2 beers, please? At some point, I am pushing my voice and I might hurt myself. I might experience the next day that I'm losing my voice or something like that. You know it from the simple sounds. Singing could be like, at the end of the road, still I can't let you go. Remember Boys to Men? Yes? A little bit suffering sound to it. But it could be just a simple sound like yelling. Have you ever thought about what you yell on? Because we discovered by researching a little bit that vowels are linked with this. It's about acoustics. It's a long story. But simplified, if you yell, how do you yell? What do you say? Yeah. Why don't you say, who? Should we try? Would you like to yell with me on an O? Can we all do an O? O, yes? Okay. And then we do 3, 4, and then we yell. 3, 4. It's a little bit stuck, right? What if we yell, hey, instead? Should we try? 3, 4. Hey! Can you hear it? The difference. So, in Denmark we have this football club called Brøndby. How many Danes do we have in the room? Quite many. Okay, and you all know Brøndby, right? Yes. Yeah, and some of you hate Brøndby. I apologize in advance. But Brøndby, it's difficult to yell, Brøndby! So if you're in a fight with the fans on the other side, it's a problem, right? And I guess these football fans, they are pretty clever. They changed the vowels to what? Yeah. So, Baba! And I guess the same goes here in Østersund, where if you Østersund, it might be a little bit difficult. So what did you do here? You changed it to ÖFK, something like that, right? Finally, we have Edge, which is a little bit similar to Overdrive, but a bit more twanged, again, as I said. And you might think, who is singing like that? But then again, if I sing, I've been knocked down, it's a crazy town, like Anastasia, or how many roads must a man walk down? You probably recognize the extreme of this gear, the extreme. Yes? So with these 4 gears and this structure, it's been easier to research and be more specific about tricks and techniques for training, and easier to be more specific when we help the singers with a wish to achieve a certain sound.
So as a singer working with Ulrik, this is one of the first things I noticed about him, that he didn't seem to think that the way my voice sounded was fixed. He seemed to believe that I could do most anything with the right technique and a whole lot of practice. And this way of thinking illustrates what Stanford professor Carol Dweck talks about as a growth mindset. The belief that most things can be learned if we just know how. And this is important if you want to continue developing into expertise in your career. one important tool for me that made it possible to shift my mindset about my voice was what Ulrik just showed you. The fact that he was able to be so specific and concrete about what I needed to do, how I needed to change, made it possible for me to think differently about my voice and what I was able to learn. It was very different from vocal teachers I'd experienced when I was a child. You may have tried this. In the choir, they would say, sing out of your eyes, or sing out the top of your head. Have you heard this? And it made some sense, but I didn't really know what it was. It was very vague and general. Ulrik and his colleagues seemed to have this whole conceptualization of the voice, and it made it possible for me to understand the small details of how I use my voice and how I can change my voice. And as we began working together, I began puzzling over, I've never trained psychotherapy this way. The way I was now training my voice, it had been much more general overall, just some courses and topics. And then I began wondering if maybe there was something about the way I'd been practicing psychotherapy that would explain why researchers have found that psychotherapy training doesn't seem to impact our performance much. It seemed like we were missing, as a field, a conceptualization like the one Ulrik and his colleagues had made of the voice. But as you may already have realized, this has changed recently. You heard Daryl talk about this. Oh, we went too far again. Here we go. You heard Daryl talk about this before the break. Together with Scott Miller, he developed what they've called a taxonomy of deliberate practice for psychotherapists. This provides us with the same idea as the conceptualization that Ulrik and his colleagues have. They've teased out lots of small details about what we can practice and break our practice down into as therapists. And it allows us to be much more specific about the way we think about our work and talk about our work and what we want to improve. And other more recent developments have also made it possible for us to think differently about deliberate practice in psychotherapy. Here we go. Over the last 7 to 10 years, new data systems have been developed, and all of them support the use of FIT, but they also make it possible for us to take the next step in thinking about deliberate practice as therapists. As many of you have heard already at this conference, using the ORS, SRS isn't what makes us more helpful or more effective. We need to do something more. We need to be able to uncover the patterns of the way we are working with the clients that we're seeing. These systems provide us with aggregate data. And by using the aggregate data, it becomes possible for us to do several things. First of all, we can detect the small areas where we need to improve. We can also measure the impact of the training, whatever professional development activities we're doing, we can measure the impact and identify, are we improving year by year? They're not very clear here, but there are these bar diagrams that make it possible for you to see, for example, are my outcomes going up? Is my effect size going up? Is my dropout rate going down with the different things I've done in my agency to try and improve? Several organizations, many of them are here today, have used systems like Fit Outcomes to try to focus on not just using the ORS, but looking at their aggregate data to improve their outcomes. And they've used it to look over time, identify patterns, and have diligently worked with specific plans about how to improve the outcomes. And for many of these organizations, this has made it possible for them to see an impact on their outcomes year by year, following the small changes they're doing actually over a quite short period of time. One practical example that I encountered recently was with a group of therapists that work with adolescents in Denmark. And they'd called me for a consultation, and they wanted us to look at their data. And we looked at their data, and immediately a concern showed up, because about a third of the young people they were seeing dropped out of service without achieving any benefit from the service. We then started digging into the rest of their statistics to see, could we find a pattern that would help us? And another pattern showed up, because on the alliance measure, on the SRS, on average, they didn't really get any feedback. This led to a conversation and a reflection about how they could engage the adolescents in giving them feedback about how they felt about the conversations, how they could talk with the adolescents about their feedback before they left the office and dropped out. We made specific plans for them to work with. We then agreed to meet and follow up after 6 months. And already after 6 months, we could begin to see improvements in their data based on what they were doing. At that point, only 20% of the adolescents had dropped out.
Yes, so after uncovering the patterns, it becomes easier to set a goal more specifically. What's the result we are aiming for, like Birgit Waller said? And from there is maybe one more important step to look at, and that's the planning.
And we call this the planning phase, and I've just up here put some of the questions that we usually consider in the planning phase. For example, where am I going to practice? When am I going to practice? How am I going to practice? What am I going to practice? Who's going to help me give me feedback on my practice? And why am I practicing? Now, at first glance, maybe the planning phase doesn't seem that important. Maybe it seems pretty obvious. And it might be something that you can feel tempted to hop over, because as Dr. Erickson was saying yesterday, most of us really just want to get to the practice part. But in the work that we did together, we quickly discovered that there's something important to consider in the planning phase, and it might not be as obvious to begin with.
So in my work, I experience now and then, I work with the singer, we come up with a diagnose or some exercises. It works very well, and they leave and they come back, and then they didn't do that exercise at home. So strange. And sometimes it's down to small things like, yeah, but you know what? I am on the road all the time, and I'm so busy, and where would I go and do those exercises? So a room where I can exercise in, or tailor the exercise so I can do it in my car as I drive around the country. Small things like that might lead to that they actually do their deliberate practice. So the point is, it can be hard to find time and practice in a busy day, and especially if you can't practice everywhere. You have to plan your practice into details.
One of the things that we found was really central in the work that we did together was to consider the question, why are we practicing? Birgit mentioned this yesterday, and we have some reflections on this question, why? Because this question is really about motivation. What is it that drives you to continue to practice? What drives the process of improving? And in many ways, it maybe is the golden question of all this deliberate practice literature. Because what is it that makes people want to continue to practice something that might feel really tough? The only point is, we know, and Dr. Erickson said this yesterday, continuing to practice is what separates the best from the rest of us. And you can think of motivation from sort of two different perspectives. The first perspective is what you could call the inner motivation, that you just have to learn something. In the literature, they sometimes call it the rage to master. You may have tried this sometimes. I remember an image of this is when my kids, Camilla and Carla, when they were really small, about 1 and 3, we lived in a house that had stairs. I don't know if you've tried kids around stairs, but they just wanted to learn how to climb the stairs. So they would be on the stairs for hours and hours, going up and down. And it was so clear. They just had to learn it. You may also have tried, look at that little guy up there. He's totally absorbed in building blocks. And you may have tried this yourself, being in an activity where time and place just disappears. You work at it, you're in this flow, you just continue to work at it for hours because you're so absorbed by the activity. But for most of us, this is not usually the case when we have to practice deliberate practice. So many of us need another type of motivation, what we've called the external motivation, where somebody else or another situation or another factor is the motivator to practice. Now, the most obvious motivators, the guy I have with me on stage, is the coach. The coach that serves as a reminder that you have to practice. And maybe you also promised him that you would practice, so you practice because you promised him. But you can also feel motivated by other things. For example, if you've promised your colleagues that you would meet and discuss a particular topic about a case, that might motivate you to prepare and practice and be ready for that conversation. Or if you promised to come give a presentation somewhere, that might also make you want to practice. The key in the planning phase is you have to consider and reflect on yourself. What motivates you? What are the different options you have for external motivation? And what is the plan if you forget to practice or stop practicing? Who are you going to call? And who are you going to talk to, consult with to get back practicing? In working with Ulrik, I think one of the things that has been most striking to me is the way he's been a coach, the way he thinks about being a coach. And I have no doubt that working with a coach like Ulrik has been very crucial in this whole project we've had together.
Yes. One thing that's very important in my work is to break things down into bits and bytes. So when we work, we locate the weak spots, then we isolate them, like one phrase in a song. Then we reduce it, break it down until the singer is capable of mastering. Then we put it together again and build up again. And to give you an example, if a singer sings a song like 400 times, for sure, they learn the lyrics, they learn the melody. But maybe there are things in the song that's not working well. And if they don't get any feedback or focus on these spots, they're actually training something wrong, putting wrong stuff into the muscular memory. Maybe this is also the stagnation that Eriksson talked about. So, and that's what I do. I find these spots together with the singer, and it could be like if I sing a phrase from Proud Mary, and I sing, left a good job in the city. Maybe you hear there's a little something in the end there. We call that unintentional vocal break. It could be intentional as well. So like, then it's intentional. But left a good job in the city. Not intentional, and it's shameful for a singer. Some of the guys even remember maybe in their puberty that suddenly the voice did something like that. And it can be in your system the rest of your life that when you do that little thing, and it's just technique, it's no big deal. But that little suddenly in a phrase makes you feel very ashamed. Okay, so I have to break it down. Left a good job in the city. City. What about one vowel? E. Still not working. Reduce, take it down in pitch. E. Oh, there's something. And then I build up with my technique. I'll spare you the details, but support and different things. E. City, 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 city. And then I put the phrase back together again. Left a good job in the city. And there it is. So the point is that we have to train more right than wrong. And to illustrate this, we have developed a method we call the matchbox method. Maybe some of you have heard about it before. One or two. The idea is that I have a matchbox like this. I empty the box. Then I do my phrase or whatever I'm working on. Left a good job in the city, and I put a match in the box. Left a good job in the city, 2 matches in the box. Do you get the picture? Left a good job in the city. Oh no. So when you do a mistake, you empty the box and you start all over again.
So, because we're at the ACE conference and all of us have to deliberately practice, we thought that we would bring some of you a little gift so you can deliberately practice, when you get home.
And there are different shapes of matchboxes. We could call this advanced training. And we would like to give this as a special gift to Mr.
Daryl Chow.
Daryl Chow. Maybe you can help us send it further up?
Up to Daryl.
Yes?
Thank you, Annika. Up to Daryl. So if we once again think about our work as therapists, then how could we break things down into smaller bits and bites? Several of the presenters have already come up with very useful ideas about this. What we talked about was, as therapists, just like for singers, you can't really practice in the room with the client when you perform. You just have to pull through the performance. But what you could do, which I loved about Daryl's presentation, is you can set up a video camera and look at the session afterwards. This allows you to pinpoint a small part of the conversation, just as in Proud Mary, slow it down, analyze it into smaller bits and pieces, and then maybe role play it and build it up again to get more ideas for how am I going to deal with this situation the next time I encounter something difficult like this. And when you start thinking about it, there are so many things you could break down into smaller bits and pieces in our work. How do we listen and pick up what the clients are telling us? What cues are we picking up from them? And are there some cues that we're not picking up? Are we skipping over some cues? How are we using our body language? Are we mirroring the client? Are we leaning forward a lot, leaning back a lot? How do we seek eye contact with the person in front of us? How do we deal with the emotion in the room? What words, sentences are we using? And of course, one obvious place to focus would be on the therapeutic alliance, breaking down your performance into the elements of the therapeutic alliance. And this is part of what the taxonomy really will help you do.
So next on the model here would be, after the planning, would be the focused practice. And of course, that's a very important part. And we need to be aware of how we are practicing and what we are practicing. Are we outside our comfort zone, for example, like somebody talked about? I call it taking new land. And I also work with foundational work, so divided, like how many minutes do I take new land work and how many minutes do I do foundational work. And when I do take new land work, I need to be even more focused, take my time, and better work for shorter periods of time, and thereby more focused. After practicing for a while, it's a crucial element to get some feedback, as we have in the low part here. And it's both on the outcome on our practice, but also on the way we are practicing.
One of the things I noticed when I first started working with Ulrik was the way he gives feedback. It was nothing like I had expected. It was so concrete and specific and matter of fact. I think I thought I came up to Ulrik's office to get sort of a judgment about how my voice sounded. But he never did that. He was descriptive. He said, you sing a lot of neutral. You don't make a lot of loud sounds with more power and volume. And Ulrik's approach to giving feedback, I think, for me, illustrates some aspects of what is necessary for feedback to be useful in your learning process. So the more concrete and specific the feedback is, the easier it is for me to go home and do something afterwards. Then I know exactly what I'm supposed to practice. The more it's focused on what I do, not who I am, again, the easier it is for me to listen to and take in. So instead of Ulrik saying, Susanne, you're a bad singer, he didn't say that. He would say maybe, you don't have a lot of twang on your voice. And the latter is much easier for me to listen to because it doesn't attack me. Again, the more the feedback is based on observations and descriptions of what happens in the room, the easier it is to take in, rather than if I feel judged or evaluated. And last but not least, for feedback to be useful, it has to be tied to something I want. And you may have tried this yourself. Somebody comes up and gives you feedback about something you never asked about. Most likely, you either just discard it as stupid, or you feel annoyed or hurt by it. So it needs to be tied to what I've said I want to learn. And many factors influence the process of giving and receiving feedback. Sorry, no, I did it again.
Yes. The idea with this illustration is that we can't understand the person we are giving feedback or receiving feedback from 100%. That's how we feel, at least. It's not possible. Let's say you sit down for many hours and try to really understand the person in front of you. Still, we are built of so many billions of small things, from how we grew up and what our parents told us, and traumas, and where we work, and so many things. So it's impossible. Even people you think you know very well. I mean, for example, my wife, I remember saying something completely harmless in my world. Have you ever experienced that? You said something completely no big deal, and then, maybe we could improve the cooking in our home a little bit. Took me half a year with sweet talks, and I didn't really mean anything about it. But then again, sometimes I can even be in doubt if I understand myself 100%. So when we receive the feedback, for example, the idea could be to try to catch it there in the air before it hits you, before it goes into your heart. Catch it, look at it, and see, is there anything here that might inspire me? Anything here that I feel like going home and train? And it's difficult to keep it outside the heart. If there is just a little spark of something, then it's a gift. If you don't see anything there, there's nothing in this feedback that I get inspired from, then maybe you should just let go. And there are many ways to get feedback indirectly as well. As a singer, you have the audience in front of you, and if you dare to open your ears and eyes, there's a lot of feedback coming there. Even as a teacher or a keynote speaker, there is some feedback in the room.
And as therapists, we're in the same position as the singer. With us in the room, we have a really valuable source of feedback if we dare to listen and watch them. We can observe, we can learn from our clients in the room.
Yeah, again, this can be challenging because we never know why a person responds the way they do, why somebody suddenly walks out of my concert or falls asleep at the keynote.
Yeah, that's right.
Speech.
I'm sure many of you have experienced situations where you've been in a room with a client and you've said something and they've had a response. And you've looked at it and you thought, oh no, that's a bad thing. Until they came back next time and you had a chance to talk with them about how they looked. And they said, it's actually because I was so moved by what you said, or because I got so many new ideas. We have to be careful when we watch the social feedback, the feedback from people in the room with us. But we also have to be brave and dare to listen and watch it.
Yes, we have to listen, we have to be brave, and right now we need to dare to sing. Yes!
Yeah. Woohoo!
Some of you are thinking, this is great, we love it. And some of you feel like, oh no. And we locked the doors, so... Number one in the book of learning how to sing will be to open your mouth. You need to try it. And number two would be to dare to open your ears and listen. And maybe you listen and what you hear sounds pretty bad. And then the next time you do it, it sounds 0.0000001% better. Quite often, closing your mouth is linked with some story. Maybe you remember, maybe not. But I have heard many stories like, for example, as a kid, you are in a choir, you're standing there, and then the guy next to you goes, and he says, it sounds awful when you sing. And you feel like, oh no, I guess that's feedback, but you never know where it comes from, right? It could be you're in love with the same girl or whatever. Or even worse, the choir leader goes, could you go in the back and sing? I've heard that a couple of times. Or even worse, could you go in the back and just pretend that you are singing? From that day, you close your mouth. Yes. And others were encouraged to sing on. So they are now singing in the bath, in the car, around the Christmas tree, in the church, along with the radio maybe. And how many hours could we say average a week? 3 hours? 2? 1 hour. 1 hour where one is opening the mouth, another one is closing the mouth. Let's say 50 weeks a year, that's 50 hours. 30 years later, here I am. And some of you now in this room have like 1,500 hours of experience. Probably many of you, many more. But 1,500 as an average, and the rest is down to maybe 50 or 100. Yes, so of course it will be different, and we would like to invite you all to dare to open your mouth now. And we have brought to you a little piece of a song, and we tried to make it simple, and we even brought the lyrics so we can focus a little bit on the technique or building up some stuff. Does anybody remember this? Yeah, it's pretty easy. It's just something like, who let the dogs out? Something like that. It's a little bit like yelling, actually. So that should be easy, right? Depending on which gear you choose. Remember the 4 gears? Who let the dogs out? That's one version. Who let the dogs out? There will be another version. Who let the dogs out? Who let the dogs out? Feel free to choose the mode. Are you ready? Okay, so I count 3, 4, and then you do your version of, it has to be the simple version, sorry. It has to be, who let the dogs out?
Yeah.
Yes, on 1. So we count like 3, 4, and then it's, who let the dogs out? Ready? 3, 4. Who let the dogs out? Wow, that's pretty good. Let's try one more time. 3, 4. Who let the dogs out? 1, 2, 3, 4. Pretty good. Sounds pretty good. A little bit to the Scandinavian side, maybe. We could try to go a bit more in direction of a bit more powerful, maybe. So if you let's try a little yell first. We did the hey. Can we do hey again? I say 3, 4, and then you say hey. 3. 3, 4. Okay. 3, 4. Hey. Wow. Amazing. This is the sound we would like to merge into the Who Let the Dogs Out. And if you do who, then it's not possible. You need something like the football fans. Who let the dogs out? Okay? Let's try. 3, 4. Who let the dogs out?
Wow.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Who let the dogs out?
Yes, a lot better. We could add a bit of the to it. Who let the dogs out? Something like that. And maybe you could even, if you put your hands in the waist, where the women have a waist, squeeze in a little bit. Can you cough? Can you feel some muscles down there? Yeah, 80% feels the muscles. Good. So if we yell, just give me a yell again. 3, 4, hey! One more time. 3, 4, hey! Do you feel the muscles? We need those muscles now. Again in the Who Let the Dogs Out. Okay. Ready for the Who Let the Dogs Out? 3, 4. Who let the dogs out? 2, 3, 4. Who let the dogs out? Yes. Very good. Great work. We have time to take it up just one level. And now let's make a little experiment. We have a couple of minutes left, and we could see if we could master an effect we call grunt. It's a little bit extreme, and for example, we hear it from the band Slipknot. And I apologize in advance, it's a little bit... Yes, the grunt, something like that. They are quite nice when they take off their masks, actually. But are you ready for grunting? Let's see if we build it up like bits and bytes, and we have like 3-4 minutes, because that would fit the sound. Who let the dogs out, right? Experiment. Maybe you should stand up. Yes, good. Step number 1. Breathe out. Step number 2. Breathe out again like it's deep, like... Maybe even form the track so it's like... Yeah. Very deep. How deep can you make it? Like a big guy or something. Very good. Can you hear it? Yeah, we researched this with cameras down the throat, and we see that the whole thing in there is like blowing in the wind. That's the sound you hear when the... Okay, one more time, breathe out. With these extreme effects, it helps with a little bit of emotion. So, that's why you hear also these sounds from kids all the time. One emotion could be if you take your hand and put it to your forehead, and those with glasses, take care, okay? So, and then when we breathe out, we hit the forehead like it's totally stupid, okay? So like, yeah. Then you push it out a little bit like, how deep can you make it? And how stupid can you make it? And even more stupid. Wow. Can you hear it? Sounds also a little bit like a big dog. Yeah. Okay. So maybe a bit more. Ready? I count 3, 4, and then you're a dog. 3, 4. Very good. Let's divide it here and say you yell, "Oh, let the dogs out!" And then you answer, Should we try? Face each other a little bit. But still, so you're able to see me because I'm trying to direct a bit here. Okay, so you do, "Oh, let the dogs out," and can we just hear, a bit deeper. Good. 3, 4. Wow, fantastic. Thank you very much for being very brave and daring the feedback from your ears. Let's end where we started. Do you remember the little sound example from Susanne? Her bass line? Remember it? Can you hear it for your inner ear? Yes? Would you like to hear where Susanne is?
So I brought a small clip to just show you, a small clip from an upcoming album I'm working on. The song is called My Heart Won't Say Goodbye. I wish that I could find the strength to carry on, and that someone else would chase my pain away. When the sky turns blue.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Honestly speaking, it touches me every time I hear this, and I've been searching, why is it touching me? It's not talent, is it? No, it's a lot of hard work. And all that hard work, it touches me. I mean, it's difficult. So it was great being here.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah. Thank you.
Oh. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Susanne and Ulrik. The slogan of the ACE 2018 conference is "Come to learn and leave inspired." I must say that all the lectures these days have really made us inspired. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So shit.
So now we have a short break, and then 2 o'clock it's time for the workshops. It's not that much time to 2 o'clock, so please go out, do what you need to do, and look for your place to be. Thank you.